Welcome to the Evolve Beyond Limits podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Geisel. This podcast is dedicated to helping you create a life that sets your soul on fire. I believe that is truly possible for everybody, but you have to be willing to do a few things. You have to be willing to let go of your past conditioning. You have to be willing to break free from societal norms. And you have to be willing to get really curious about your life and how you can start to look at it differently. Each week, we will hear stories from people who have done exactly this. People who chose to disrupt the life path they were on, go against the grain, and share the lessons and perspective shifts they had to make along the way. Every episode is committed to not only inspiring you and connecting you with other amazing humans, but actually giving you the tools you need to use this information in your own life so that you continue to evolve and reconnect with your highest self. Are you ready? Let's have some fun. Welcome to this week's episode of the Evolve Beyond Limits podcast. I am bringing you such a special guest this week. She is Haley Cole, and she has been a mentor of mine and somebody who's really helped me along on my own spiritual journey. So I wanted to share her story and just her outlook with you. She started her spiritual journey at the age of 8 when she was introduced to various wonderful teachers and teachings. And throughout her childhood, she really continued to learn about meditation, utilizing her intuition, the chakras. And at the age of 16, she became a Reiki Master. She gets really vulnerable and shares the experiences that happened to her throughout her life and how she had to really treat healing as a second job to move through them. She talks about how she had the desire to move across country and she was led by her intuition to do that. And with $500 in her pocket, she packed up and left. She started her business and has been doing this work ever since. As a golden light intuitive healer and divine feminine teacher, she has now devoted her light to helping others discover just how powerful they are through her mystery school, healing certifications, readings, podcasting, coaching, and speaking. She has also hosted and led events for companies such as Google and YouTube. She believes this work is so important because once we discover how magical we are, we can really change the world. I'm so excited for you to hear the rest of her story, so let's dive in. All right, Haley, I am so excited to have you here on the Evolve Beyond Limits podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
At the beginning, I just love to take a couple minutes and get the listeners to get to know you a little bit better. So I just have a couple rapid fire questions. Nothing too difficult, I don't think.
Sounds good.
So, all right, first one, we'll keep it really easy. What is your favorite color?
That's actually not an easy question for me. It changes all the time. Like that aquamarine color or a pink, one of the two.
Oh, okay. I love it. I love it. Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Connecticut right now.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that where you're from?
Yeah. That's where I'm originally from. Yeah.
Love it. I met Haley when she was living in California. So she's been back and forth on the coast.
Just bopping around everywhere.
It's so good. All right. What is your favorite food?
Ooh, I think pad thai. I love pad thai.
Oh, that's a good choice. I haven't had that in a long time. Now it's sparking my interest. All right. So you have done some traveling. What is one of your favorite places that you've traveled?
Ooh. I don't know. I feel like California feels like home to me. So I would probably say I know it seems like an interesting answer, but probably California. And
is there a certain,
I love Laguna. That's probably one of my favorite places. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. What is one thing that's on your bucket list?
I really want to travel to actually, no, I take that back from the last question. I went to Hawaii. I completely forgot about that. And that was probably the best place I've ever traveled. I take that back. Going on to the next question. I'm sorry.
We're going to revise that one. Okay.
Wait, no, that was way better. Sorry. I really want to go to all the sacred, kind of what we were talking about before, sacred sites. So I really want to go to ancient Egypt and going to the sites there. And I would love to go to Greece. I have zero desire to go to Rome, but I would love to go to Greece and see Greece. And I'd love to go back to Hawaii and kind of explore even more. I would love to go to like Thailand and like remote. I like going to like the jungle and like remote areas where like no one else is around. So yeah.
That would terrify most people, but you're like, I want to go be in the jungle by myself.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's so good. Okay. So this is kind of a fun question because you started, and we'll get into this in a minute, but like you started your journey that you're on now so young. But when you were little, like what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think I didn't really think about it too much. I just like, I always loved creating artwork and I always just like loved spirituality. So I think it was more just like, I knew what I loved, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like I didn't know that it was a possibility. So I always just kind of settled on like whatever someone told me I should do. So like for a while, I wanted to be like a teacher. For a little bit, I wanted to be like a journalist, and none of those things would have turned out. But like, I think I always wanted to like do something within artwork and spirituality, which is kind of what I'm doing. So,
Right. I know it's so fun to see that. And like, if you would have gone to be a teacher, right? Like, it's funny.
It wouldn't have worked. I would have not been a good teacher.
All right. What is one of your favorite books? Like, this is the first one that comes to mind.
Autobiography of a Yogi is probably my favorite book.
Love it. Okay. I actually haven't read that. I'll have to pick it up.
Yeah.
So I just asked that question so I can keep adding to my book arsenal. All right. So I have like so much love for you and what you do. And like you started your spiritual journey at the age of 8, which is kind of funny because like for most people, and you let me know if this is like incorrect, but a lot like we're all born really intuitive. And then that's almost like when we start to like fall away from it is because we're like told that that's not the way the world works. Right. And so can you tell me more about like how that started at such a young age and kind of took off?
Yeah. So I kind of always I grew up in a Spanish family that was very, very spiritual. And for a little while, it was just focused on religion. So like talking to God was always very encouraged from a very, very young age. And like for me, and my mom would disagree, but for me, whenever I would go to ask for advice, I'd be like, go meditate, like go listen to your intuition and from like super, super young. So that was always very encouraged, in my family. And then my parents kind of decided they wanted to try something else. And they kind of went through, I guess, a spiritual awakening, or at least my mom did. And so we started when I was around 8 going and exploring other avenues. So like different philosophies and going to different teachers. And we met a really, really beautiful like spiritual teacher who studied as, I think like a Yama is the official title. It's kind of like a monk. And he was like a feng shui master and just really, really like advanced spiritually. And he would come and teach my brothers and I like how to meditate and, you know, how like the different gods and goddesses. He would teach workshops by us. So it was definitely like anytime he would come, I would learn a lot about spirituality and just on my own time, like I don't remember honestly what they are now because I was so young, but like any books that I could find, I loved like playing with oracle cards from a really young age, like anything that I could get my hands on to like help me spiritually, I would try and just like take in all the time, and evolve that way. And then I would kind of just like, I meditated from a very young age as well. And it just kind of built from there. And then when I was around 14, I started the process of getting attuned to Reiki. And then at 16, I became a Reiki Master. And then I like literally the day I became a Reiki Master, I kind of like veered off the path a little bit. And it was so clear looking back, like I had such a clear choice between the two. And not that I chose wrong, but I think I chose and made decisions of what a 16-year-old girl decides, looking back. And it just took me on a whirlwind of a path. And it was never really something I went away from, like spirituality. I know that sometimes people say they turn their back on it. I never really did that. I just kind of kept it very quiet. and very inward, and I wanted to kind of be normal. So I was like kind of pretending and putting on masks and things like that. But it just got to a point where after a lot of trauma and a lot of unfortunate decisions that I had to really turn it around, and I had to make a choice, and I had to really commit to healing. So it's kind of like it's evolved since then, and I got to the other side, and that's kind of where I am right now. And that's a very short version of the story. I'm happy to go into details, but sometimes when people hear like you start your spiritual journey at 8, like I see their faces and they're just like, oh my God, how long is this going to take? So I try to like keep it a little bit short.
We're going to be here until tomorrow. No, I'm just kidding. Oh my gosh. I feel like I could take your story and go in like 15,000 different directions. But the first one is like, just that I just want to mention is that I think that it's really neat that like you grew, like your family grew up with something. And then it was like this, there's almost this like permission to experiment with something else or like different things and like learn different things. And from your experience, like, cause you said, that in the beginning, it was more religion and then it turned to spirituality. And I don't know that a lot of people, like people know that there's a difference, but they like, how would you explain kind of what that meant for you?
I think for me, I was also very young. So the way that it was interpreted for me is probably a little bit different than what my answer might be like now as an adult. For me, I think it felt very structured. And it's really interesting because I was younger. I was older than I'm the oldest of 3. And so I actually like have religious trauma where my brothers don't because they were so young. So for me, I think that it was a lot more like critical. And I actually felt in church less connected to God than just like being in my everyday. Like when I was just like connecting on my own, it's more of an organization more than anything. And at least the way that I was raised in it and the way that like it came through. I know it was also Roman Catholic, so very organized, like very this is what it is. So I don't know the experience of other religions and I can't really speak to that. But you know, in my experience, it's much more of an organization and it almost feels like a business rather than connecting to God. At least in the way that I experienced it. It's very root chakra based because it's organization and very foundational. And to me, what was preached a lot was having to rely outside and that like everything is outside of you, even though that's literally not really what it says in the Bible, but that's kind of what the verbiage is. And so that's kind of what it felt like to me. It's more of an organization and believing in that organization versus spirituality to me is more of believing in God and source as a whole. And however you choose to do that and within the realms of love and devotion is completely up to you. But it feels less organizational to me.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because like, and you'll probably understand this too, that whenever anybody starts to, or sometimes when I talk about like energy or we talk about like chakras or we talk about different things, people try to really put that into a religious box. Right. Like, and I'm like, well, it has nothing to do with that. And I think that it's a common misconception about spirituality that it actually takes people away from religion, which from my experience, if you can go about this the right way, it actually brings people closer to feeling closer to whatever God it is that they believe in. But it's just like sometimes we have to let go of, like you're saying, so much structure to it and like kind of find your own way. So, yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And then you went on to be a Reiki master. So can you explain to anybody who's listening that might not know what that is? I mean, like, I think people go into Reiki and never become a Reiki master, and you were one at 16. So like, what was that? Could you just explain a little bit more about that?
Honestly, like, I don't know what happened. What I think happened, because I was, again, pretty young, is that my teacher told my mom I should be in the classes. And so I was literally just there. And then I was asked if I wanted to do it. And I was like, sure. and then I was there. Like, that's like kind of how I remember it. Like, it wasn't like anything like the heavens didn't open up. It was just like, hey, do you want to do this? And it was just like, yeah. And then we were like in my grandparents' house, and it was like me when like the master certification was happening. It was like literally just like my grandparents, my parents, my aunts, and then like a friend or something. So it wasn't like it didn't feel like that big of a deal when I was going through it. But essentially what Reiki is, and I actually, to be full disclosure, to be honest, I don't really utilize the energy anymore. But it's essentially just like a form of healing through your hands, and you utilize different symbols and different forms of energy to help, and you work a lot with the chakra system. And you utilize the symbols that are given to you during your attunement to help and clear the energetic body. And you work with the chakras. So that's kind of like a little bit of a brief overview. And each attunement, you kind of like learn different symbols, and you go deeper into that process. And so it was probably didn't have to be as long of a process, but I'm really happy it was, just because I was so young. But it was definitely, it wasn't anything that was it felt like a big deal to me. It was definitely just, all right, like I'm here. I need to be here, so I'm here. And I did like it, and I did like learning about it. And it was definitely something that helped propel my spiritual journey forward. And I definitely referred back to on a lot in like the years going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, like I said, I think that some people like hear that and it's like, what is that? But it's a version of working with energy, and different things. So you talked about the fact that you like got to this point and then you went the other direction. And I think that it's so important to actually touch on this, because like you literally said that you wanted to feel normal. And I wanted to touch on this because like this type of thing, a lot of spirituality, a lot of things, people, it's not like you are looked at like you're a little bit wacko, right? Like I know that feeling. And so I can't even imagine at 16 what that feels like. And like, can you talk a little bit more about that experience, about just like wanting to feel normal, but then like, how did you kind of start to break free of that? Like,
so it was really interesting. It wasn't ever, it's really hard to explain sometimes, because people are like, oh, you completely just like didn't like do anything. I was like, no, like it was still very much there. It just felt like I had two different personalities, or like I had two different sides to me. And like only my family knew about one side, and then everyone else knew about another. Cause it was like never that I stopped believing or I stopped utilizing it or anything like that. Or, I still loved it. It was a very clear distinction of kind of going and wanting to pretend a little bit more. And so kind of around that age and even like before then, I think there was such a clear difference in the way that like my family, like people kind of approached my family and stuff like that. Cause people didn't really know what was going on, but they kind of had an idea, cause I grew up in a very small town. And so it was like very church, and that was kind of it. And that was like a lot of like the social stuff as well. And so I think that growing up, had a little bit of an identity crisis. I didn't really know who I was. And I had very low self-esteem as a result of that. And I was trying to like kind of figure out like my way and who I was and how I wanted to show up. But then on the other side of that, like when I was surrounded by anything spiritual, like that's when I felt whole, and that's when I felt complete, and that's when I truly felt like myself. But that wasn't my day to day. So I think growing up, I had to figure out how I can mold myself into something that people could accept, just so that I could like get through being a kid, and get through that time of my life. But I was miserable. Like I was depressed. I was anxious. Like I had, my mental health was so bad. And I ended up getting into a really, really toxic, and abusive relationship. And I developed an eating disorder. And, I just like, after I got out of that and I healed that, I didn't want to deal with any emotions. So I was in college and I went to a big party school. So, alcohol was like very, very prevalent. And so then I like turned to partying and I graduated and I was interning at this company that was supposed to be spiritual, but not really. That's like why I was like tuned into it. But I was just like, yeah, they're not, but that's okay. We send them love. And about like a month in, I ended up just a little bit of a trigger warning. I was assaulted and it just kind of threw me off so much. And everything that I was trying to suppress from those years just came up to the surface to deal with. And that was when I remember like so distinctly like, laying on my bed and just like I was having trouble getting up and going to work and like getting out of bed in the morning. And I was like crying all the time and I was so miserable. And I just kind of like was sick of feeling that way. And so I was just like, okay, well, no one's saving me here. I have to save myself. So what can I do to make sure that I can implement what I need to do to make sure that I'm happy? Like that was my only goal. Like I didn't want a business at the time. Like I didn't want to like teach this. Like all I wanted was to be happy and to like experience joy.
Right.
Because when I thought about it, I was like, I don't remember the last time I was happy. Like I don't remember the last time I was like truly consistently experiencing joy. Like there were moments, but they were fleeting. And then I was contemplating and I just was like, God, like I need some guidance here. And I heard like you had the tools, start utilizing them. And I was just like, oh my God, that's so true. Like I've been learning this since I was like 8. And so I treated healing like a second job. And looking back, like my job was so boring. And I didn't like it at all, but it was so mindless that it created the space for me to be able to heal. Because I didn't have to I wasn't drained afterwards. Like I could just focus on my healing. And so I would get out of work, I would work out, I would cook a dinner, and I would then go meditate, and I would only allow myself to take in media at this time that was positive or affected my spiritual journey, or I could learn something. I wouldn't really watch TV. Even going on social media, I was really careful with what I consumed with that. It was very much, I only took in positive stuff, and stuff that I could gain knowledge from. And it was literally a second job for me. And the whole process took around a year and a half, I would say, before I started feeling a lot better before then. But really when I felt I could help others, it was probably a year and a half when I felt okay, I'm ready to teach and to help, and to support. And during that time, that's when I was taught golden light healing from my guides. And it's grown since then, and I've learned more and stuff like that. And they've taught me more, but the basis of it was during that period, actually, where they would take me through meditations and they'd be like, this is how you heal this. This is how we're going to do this. And it's interesting because when I teach it, it's very overview. But when I was going through it, it would be here's one memory, sit with it for 2 weeks. And we're going to take you through the process over and over and over again until you know what you're doing. And I had to sit there and I would go over it, the same memory sometimes for 2 weeks, over and over and over again, and work on healing it from all different directions, all different perspectives, all different sides, and past life stuff and the energetic body. And I learned a lot during that time from my team and from my guides, but it was an intense time period. It was definitely an intense isolation period as well. But it was one that when I was out of it, I was ready to help other people, which was good and what I needed.
Yeah. I mean, and it's such an interesting point that people don't we have to focus on our relationship with ourselves first, because there's no way that you would have been able to help anybody if you wouldn't have taken the time to isolate. And it's always hard when you are in relationships, whether it be friendships, family, different things. I say this to my friends often because I've had to learn to do this, is I'm when I make a choice to not be with you, it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with me. Right. And that is really difficult sometimes for people to understand. They're so I can only imagine like a year and a half. And like for anybody who's listening, like understand that it's not an overnight thing. And I've had women who are in my group and things have started to come together. Like, I don't know, it was like 2 weeks ago. It's like everything changed. And I was like, yeah, like things can feel like they're coming together overnight, but it didn't happen overnight. It's the weeks and weeks and weeks that you have been pouring, and years sometimes that you've been pouring into yourself. Then things finally do feel like they're coming together, but it would have never happened if you weren't willing to put in that time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that time is so important. And I know, it's not that you have to be perfect in order to help people, but no one wanted my help when I was like laying in bed crying all the time. Like that wasn't good for anybody. So I think that there's definitely this period where you do have to pour all that into you, and honor that and honor the time period that you're in, which sometimes involves isolation. Like I literally lived in like an attic. It was a nice attic, but I lived in an attic. And just meditated all the time.
Like it was a really fancy attic, but it was still an attic.
I was like, this is definitely an attic.
I think that, like, do you think that you would have really been able to help people in the capacity that you get to help them now if you wouldn't have been through like the life experience that kind of took you into that darker space?
I think that it allowed me to have more compassion, but I don't think it was necessary, to be completely honest.
Okay.
But I obviously, like, I think everything does happen for a reason. And I can empathize with so many different experiences now just because I feel like I've lived like a million lives. And I can empathize with that, especially with experiences that women have gone through, that are very common for women. So even though I understand why it happened, like I also think that it made me more compassionate. But I always meditate on it, and my guides were like, you made a choice. It wasn't necessary, but you made a choice. And that's true. And those choices have made me stronger and more compassionate. But those choices were also often laden with self-deprecation and, self-sabotage. And so if I had learned the lessons I needed to learn earlier, I probably wouldn't have experienced that. But because, especially, for me, sometimes I have extremes kind of happen. Like those were extremes, and I learned the lessons that way. And that's how I chose to learn the lessons. But I think that if I had this self-confidence earlier, I don't think it would have been necessary. But, I understand now, and I'm not angry at those people now. And I'm not angry at myself anymore. But it was definitely a process, and an interesting one. But yeah, I know like usually the answer for people is just like, yeah, like I'm grateful for everything. But like every time I tune in, I'm like, no, that experience wasn't necessary. Like I did that to myself. But I also, some of them I did to myself. But it also allowed me to get on the path I needed to go on. So I have a very neutral outlook on it, I guess.
Yeah. I appreciate that perspective because I think that it really goes in alignment with like you say it. I have had we'll often make life harder than it has to be, but it's because we go directly against what our intuition is telling us, and we go right. And so you think back to like that moment at 16 where like all you wanted to do was be accepted but not like, and so you started to change yourself instead of like, well, this is where I'm at and I'll find my people one day, which that's so hard at 16, or that's hard at freaking 33 right now. Or but it is amazing when like the cascade of what can happen when we try to hide who we really are and how hard we actually do make life because we struggle so bad to just step out and say, you know what, like this is all of me.
Yeah.
And like you accept it or don't, but it's so hard.
Interesting. Like growing up, I remember I was friends with this one really, really like, he was a really nice kid. Sorry, excuse me. And his mom, was, I think, like very, very Catholic. And she found out that like we weren't Catholic and that we were very spiritual. And she thought that I was a witch and didn't like that he hung out with me. And like, there was like that whole drama. So it was just like, it was definitely just like it was just like so bizarre, to definitely have like experiences like that. But yeah, it was all like, I had intuitive hits. Like, and looking back, like I was told like, no, don't date this person. Like, no, don't go there. Like, and I ignored them. Had I not ignored them, I wouldn't have had that experience. And some of them were not my choice. And I'm going to relay that because I don't want anyone to think that like, it's choices. It's your choice when something happens. But it definitely opened my eyes up in a way that I needed at the time. But looking back, if I had always listened to my intuition, probably wasn't always necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's just a really powerful, like, nobody teaches you to listen to that. Like, we're literally taught the total opposite.
I was, and I still didn't listen.
See, okay. So I feel much better. No, I'm just kidding. But for like most people listening, like we're not taught like, hey, go inward and listen to your intuition. We're, especially as women, and like nothing against men, but like especially as women, the culture that we live in is don't trust yourself. You don't know what you're doing. Like, and like we kind of grow up with this whole thing of like, just everyone else will tell you what to do. And that's not what you should do. And so it's hard to, break free of that. And that's what's so fun about like what you do now. And just like what you've taught me to do is really listen to that inner guidance. And even when it seems a little bit crazy, right? It's like, okay, like I have to trust that this is actually where I'm supposed to go. So let me ask you this. So you've learned a lot of lessons along the way, right? Of like not listening to your intuition. So what do you think, like, what is one of the biggest like leaps of faith, or like what somebody would call like the craziest things that you have done, because your intuition guided you to do it, where other people might look at that and be like, you did what?
Oh my God, there's so many. I mean, like growing up, I transferred schools a lot just because I would get messages to leave. And so I literally, like, I would go to my parents one day and I'm like, I don't want to go to this school anymore. And I want to go back to like a public school or something like that. So like that was often just like why like people like on the outside didn't really understand. But they always were like, okay, which was great. And like very privileged I was able to do that. But I think the craziest was probably when I got laid off and I was like, I want to move across the country. And I had gotten the message that I needed to move to California about like probably 8 months before I actually did. And I had been applying for jobs in the meantime and nothing was solidifying. And it was February, I got laid off from my 9 to 5 on the East Coast, and which was not surprising. I'm a terrible employee. I was not a good employee for them. So I'm like, wow, it's like, surprised I'm not getting fired. This is great. And then it was just one day I saw someone post a apartment that was free in LA. And I was like, okay, I just got the message that I needed to move in May. And so I just contacted them. I was like living kind of off of unemployment. Pretty much. That was it. And then I just packed up my car. I had like $500 in my bank account. My friends drove me across the country. I got super, super sick. I was like in a coma the entire time. And yeah, I had like pretty much nothing. And I just like, okay, I think I'm going to start a business. And that's when I started my business when I was out there. That was probably the craziest thing. But I am also someone who no one was surprised. In my immediate circle, I'm very much like that. So in my immediate circle, no one was surprised. But when I tell other people, they're just like, that's very crazy. I'm just like, well, it is what it is. It worked out.
Right. Yeah. And I like, it's so fun because most people would be like, that's a crazy idea. Right. But like, I think that personally, most of the best things are created out of like kind of a crazy idea, right? Because like that's what kind of gets us somewhere new and into that unknown. Um, so and so when you got there, right? Like what were some of the things, like you started a business, like do you feel like it was like things kind of came together after you listened to that and like where you were at in your life?
um, it wasn't like I got there and then everything fell into place. Like I was very taken care of. But no, it was difficult. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like it wasn't an easy time. It was really hard. And I struggled a lot, and it was definitely, but it was a time period too where I had to trust and I had to have faith. And that was a test for me, is to see like how much faith do you have? Like, are you going to give up? Like, are you just going to surrender? Like, are you going to do what we're telling you to do? So there was definitely just so much trust that had to be involved in that time period. But it was difficult, and like things worked out in the way that they were supposed to, and I was taken care of, and I always saw that. But I know people have stories of like, I went across the country and I was making like $1 million in like 2 weeks. And it's just like, it didn't happen with me. Like I needed to learn how to trust and how to surrender more and to be disciplined and to devote myself further. And that was my lesson. And so it was a process for me, and it was kind of, it was a slower one, but it definitely got to a point where it felt slow. I think looking back, it wasn't, but
it always does.
But it wasn't when I look back, but like, no, I'm like, it didn't feel like it was going quickly. And yeah, but it did fall into place, but it definitely took a little bit to get the ball rolling and to get moving. So that was very interesting, but I think in any spiritual business, and I was talking to my friend, and obviously like this isn't everybody's experience, but what I've kind of noticed whenever I've done readings on people who want to have like a very spiritual business or have spirituality involved in it, is there's a period of that typically where you are really tested. And I don't really like that word, but it's kind of just like, okay, like how much do you trust? Like also, how do you feel about money? Because when you're in a spiritual business, it can't be really motivated by money. It has to be motivated by service. And so it's very tricky, because when you don't have a lot of money coming in, you still have to be devoted to service at the same time, and you have to live in integrity. And so I know it's interesting, but I think spiritual businesses in particular are tested more than others, because you have to have integrity, even more so than I think like even more so than other businesses do, because you're working with source, people are trusting you. And if you're not fully devoted in service, then you need to reevaluate why you're doing it. And so there was a period where I had to understand it's about service, it's about devotion, understand your devotion to God even further. And when I really gained that foundation even more, like not that I was ever like, wasn't like heisting people or anything like that. Like I wasn't doing anything bad. But it was just a whole other level of deepening my relationship with God. And when that really solidified and I had that foundation, then more started to roll in and more things started to happen.
I could not be more obsessed with what you just said, because I think that so Haley is a huge mentor of mine. She taught me how to do golden light healing. It was a huge pivotal point. One of those intuitive things. It was one of those moments where it was a gut thing. And I was like, I just know I have to do this. My husband hates my gut, because he's like, oh my God, like, here we go again. But it literally has never steered me in the wrong direction. And so after working with you, I am able to work with people on such a deeper level and help them so much more. Mm-hmm. But if there's something that I have learned in having spirituality in my business, is that you're right. Like you have to be so dedicated to the service, and you also have to be like really okay not being seen. And I think that is like for a lot of times people don't move forward in this because like egoically we want somebody to see the work we do, and it's like the work that we do doesn't really do that. And so I know that like it's so transformative, but it's not the thing that people are out screaming from the rooftops on, because it's not an overnight thing. It's a process. It's something that you keep right, exactly. And like I try to add as much fun as I possibly can to it, but there's still like with all healing, there's going to be like that deep, deep, deep inner work. It's going to take a lot. And so I love that you're saying that, because for anybody listening, like just because things like you do always have to reevaluate your like why you're doing what you're doing. And you might actually be able to touch on this. It's so funny. If anybody out there like knows about like angel numbers and different things, like for the longest time, my 822 always popped up, which is actually my birthday, 8/22/88. And I just like assumed that it was like my birthday. I was like, okay, it's obviously like a message from angels. I just don't really know what it is. I literally just looked it up the other day because I was like, maybe I should look this number up instead of just like assuming. I was like, it literally was like, you have to be devoted to service and to serving others. And I was like, oh, which I am, but like you said, it's so easy, especially in the world that we live in, to flip it and be like, all of a sudden, like working on your money mindset. And what does that look like? Because, and having that like unconditional trust when with everything you have that you are moving in the right direction, but like things haven't quite, quote unquote, come together yet. That's hard.
Yeah. And even too, I think for me, I had to reevaluate, because I think I was chasing to an extent, because I have so many like great, like beautiful friends who are doing like so many great things in this space. And, they're hitting those months that are always advertised. And I was like, oh, I'm not successful unless I hit those months. But then it's also just like, do you really what would you do with that? Like, I think there was an aspect of that too. It's just like, you don't buy a lot. And like, it was just like, there was like, I was meditating there one day and they're like, even if we gave you that money, and of course, like you're worthy of so much. And but like my guides were kind of laughing at me. They're just like, what would you even do with that if we gave it to you? And I was like, I don't actually even know. And they're just like, so it's always just, obviously you could have like more than enough. And I never want anyone to think that like you can't live in abundance or anything like that. But I think that there's so much comparison that happens, like, especially when you look on social media, and there's so many like quote unquote spiritual teachers and spiritual mentors. And, it's very money focused even in that realm. And while money is great, and I'm not saying it's not, it allows you to have experiences and help people in a deeper way and stuff like that. It's not the end all be all. And I think spirituality is really taken a turn to focus on manifestation for materials and not what it's about. And I think that when you have a spiritual business, you have to have that realization. And if you want to have a successful and pure spiritual business, you have to have that realization and then also implement the necessary things that you need to implement to ensure that you're all about service and devotion. And then through that service and devotion, you are going to be taken care of.
That's beautiful. I think that's a good reminder for me, as well as probably other people, that, and it's funny because I was like thinking about this the other day as I was like a spiritual awakening isn't something that can be captured on Instagram. So like, it's like, we've got to be very careful.
That.
Right. But like but I see it all the time where like, and I see personally, especially like I was in Sedona probably a month ago, and this like idea of this, there's a lot of like spiritual bypassing. Like people want to just completely skip the actual hard day-to-day, like commit to the practice and the discipline, because they want to be, they want to be there. And that's the problem with, all of us get that way. And I love that so I like that you've been so vulnerable and honest about the fact that like, it wasn't like, oh, flip a switch and now things are things are perfect because like we usually have to sit in things for way longer than we want to. And looking back, it's not all that long, but in the middle of it, you're like, I just want this to be over. But like, it's kind of not up to you how long you're going to sit in it.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, I think we're obsessed with like quick fixes and quick processes. And that's not how the spiritual journey works. And it's never how it's worked. It takes lifetimes, and it depends on what lifetime you're on. But I think too, it's unfortunate because I think in the West, we don't have the teachers that are in other areas of the world. And so we get kind of diluted messaging. And so I think that it's a really beautiful thing if we turn to, teachers who have reached a certain point that you want to reach. And obviously it might not be everybody's goal to be enlightened. It's mine. So I turn to people who are enlightened. But I think that if you want to be on a spiritual journey, you need to turn to teachers who have reached a certain level. And not a lot of those teachers are honestly on Instagram. So I think that it depends. Like you really have to ask yourself, like if you want to do this journey and you really want to devote yourself, like take in pure teachings and take in and look to people who have reached a certain level and reached a certain point, and are preaching, not even preaching, that's actually a bad word to use, but like talking about God's source in a way that is very like loving and compassionate, but almost like matter of fact in a very not religious way, but like almost like neutral. Just like, this is what it is. Take it or leave it. It's not fun, but there's joy within like the experience.
Right.
So I think too, that's a really big thing.
Yeah. And I think that that's important. You have to, I was actually funny. I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, I'm really glad that I actually never have to talk about how much money I make on Instagram. I was like, because my business is very different, right? Like I'm not focused on that. I will choose an experience over having a bunch of money in the bank at like any day. And so I just think it's kind of fun just to see. And we're always learn. And like for everybody who's listening too, like there are going to be steps to this process. Like you don't just like hop in one day and every time I work with anybody, I'm like, listen, like once you start down this path, it literally never ends. So like, are you ready to take that step? And it's again, like you said, there's so much joy and there's so much beauty in it. But it takes a lot of courage to like understand that it's going to go and go and go. And like, you're never going to essentially be, I mean, maybe for some people they'll be done, but it's like whatever that means,
Yeah, it's definitely, it's an ever evolving thing, especially for like the quote unquote like average person. It takes time in a world right now where we don't like to be patient. So it's like, that's like the ultimate test, I think right now too, is to be okay with that. But it's an ever evolving path and an ever evolving thing.
Yeah. But it's so fun. Like, it's so fun. And that's like since I kind of started on that journey, it literally, people would always ask, like, how do you like meditate every day? And I was like, are you kidding? I was like, I'm always like, what am I going to learn about myself today? Like, this is going to be fun. Right. Like, and I think, yeah, like we have to, everything that we do can't just be to like check off the box. And that's the same thing with your spiritual journey. Like you don't meditate and journal and, do the things, just to get through it. Like, I don't know. And for me, I think that's when things really changed for me, is when I wasn't like, this is what I need to do in order to move through this. It was like, you know what? Like, how can I just get more curious about where I am and whatever lesson I'm in the middle of, and, hopefully be guided. And I think it's so funny because whenever like the amount of time is relative, right? Like some people think that like a day is a long time. Some people think a month is a long time. And I think that's like a lesson that I'm going through right now, is that I don't get to decide when the clarity is going to come.
Mm-hmm.
All I can do is show up every day and hope that it will.
Sitting in there in meditation, like, okay, I'm here. I'm doing it. Yeah,
And
it's so true. Like you never know. It's almost like not really up to you. It's like just your job. Like what my guys always tell me, they're just like, it's just your job to do what we're telling you to do, and the rest is up to us. And so that's exactly like kind of what it is, but like humans like control. So
right. I was going to say, because I know that like a lesson I'm here to learn for sure is surrender, surrender and trust. And that is what, like, whenever I try to force anything, it literally never works out. Or it takes significantly longer than it probably would have if I would have just said, like, if I go into a meditation, I'm like, I want the answer to this now. Like, it's not going to happen. It's just not.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you're willing to sit there for hours, maybe you'll get the answer, but sometimes people don't want to sit there for hours.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't worked up to that yet.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, this has been so good. And I think that you just give a lot of different perspectives. And I hope that everybody who's listening, because I do think you tell a very true, like, just honest, like, this is how things are, and it's not always easy. And it's also
say that, like, seeing the world through, like, being able to like open that up and like seeing the world through like the eyes of the divine is such like it's more magical than like anything else in the world. So it is fun, but there's aspects to it that I think that people haven't been as honest about as they should be.
Yes. Like I was in tears this morning. So we'll be honest and it's so funny because, okay, I wasn't going to share this, but now I will because I'm pretty much an open book. But like this morning I had this feeling of the same thing that we literally just talked about, which is not shocking to me considering who I'm talking to. But it was like this, I realized I was, again, pushing in a certain direction. And I started to lose the focus of like why I do what I do. And it's because like it literally brings me so much joy to help other people. And like that has to be the main thing always. And it's just so easy to like lose track of that. So it's so fun. But like that doesn't mean that I don't break down in tears often. And like,
it's easy.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. So this has been so fun. I love to just ask like one final question to everybody, which is, what is one lesson you feel like you are in the middle of learning right now?
Ooh, I think I'm in the middle of learning. It's not even a lesson. I think I'm kind of in the middle of learning, like in the midst of how like my relationship with God at a deeper level, and it's ever evolving, and understanding that and how to devote myself further to it and what it looks like. Because it looks different now than it did a year ago, than it did 6 months ago. And so I'm kind of learning how that transition is happening and how my life needs to look in order to have that be more at the forefront.
So good. It's a constant reassess, reevaluate. And like, I love that you said that because like I'm not the same person I was, an hour ago. And like, it's just so important to give yourself that space to be constantly reevaluating where you are and where you need to be headed. And it's going to look really different from chapter to chapter in our life. So I love that. So if people want to connect with you more, how can they do that? Where can they find you?
You can find me at I am Haley Cole on Instagram. My handle is HALEY COLE. And then I have a YouTube channel. I don't really know how usernames work on there. So just like try to type me in and maybe I'll pop up. I don't really know. Like there's just like, it says it's an enigma to me. And then I also have a website where I sell like intuitive and channeled artwork called Golden Alchemist Designs. So you can find me on there too.
And they're so cool. They're so fun. So definitely check out Haley's work. Like I said, she has been a a very integral part of like, I wouldn't be where I am today without her love and her guidance and just like, so I appreciate you. And I know that people are going to want to connect. So please reach out because yeah, she is a really, really bright light and you definitely want her in your life in some way.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Haley.
Of course.
Welcome to the Evolve Beyond Limits post show. And we just got finished listening to Haley's interview. And I think the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway, and I would love to hear yours, but my biggest takeaway was that do we make life significantly harder than it has to be? And I think the answer to that is yes. We do. We do that. I always joke that, like our intuition, our guidance, our highest self is always like God, the divine, whatever you want to like associate with, is always tapping us on the shoulder. It's always giving us like a, hey, you should be going this way, or, like, here's a little hint. It's always giving us these little nudges. And it's when we don't listen to them that shit goes up in flames, quite frankly. Like it's those, because that's when, if we don't listen to the nudges, if we don't listen to the taps on the shoulder, then guess what happens? We get a 2x4 to the side of the head. Like that is what happens because we're not listening. So yeah, I do think that we actually make life so much more difficult than it has to be because we're so afraid to listen to that inner wisdom, to listen to that little piece of yourself that is calling you to do something different. So what stops us? And I would say that almost always it's fear. It's a perceived fear though. And that's the thing, is that most fear is not actually real. Like, yes, there is fearful, like life, changing situations that happen that we need to be afraid. But most of our fear is actually perceived. It's not real. It's something that we have made up in our head and it stops us. It stops us from moving forward with that little voice in your head or that feeling in your gut. And where that fear can show up in so many different ways. Like it can be fear of judgment. It can be fear of the unknown. It can be fear of, looking a certain way. Like there's just so many different ways that fear can show up and you might not even see it coming because fear sometimes it can be inaction. Like simply inaction is usually a fearful thing. Like when you're afraid to act on something, you think about things all the time, but you never bring them to life. Like it's probably fear that's actually stopping you, or you dream about a different life or, and all of that, but you can't seem to take the action steps to move forward. Avoidance, like simply avoiding things altogether, is definitely a way that fear can show up, and coming up with excuses for all the reasons why you can't or all the reasons why it won't work out. Again, usually fear, right? So we have to look at the fear that we have created in our life. And what's so interesting is that I think as we get older, the fear increases. Like it's so much more difficult to break the cycle, but it can be done. But why it's so important that we break it is because when fear usually manifests in, we want to control everything, right? And when we want to control everything, it's because we don't trust. And when we don't trust, then the other side of that is fear. But it's also scarcity. Fear is looking at the world in a very scarce way. And the problem with that is that when we live in that scarcity place and we live in fear, it pushes away abundance in our life. And that abundance, we've learned, is not just simply material wealth, but it's also joy, it's love, it's happiness, it's opportunities. Like every time that you don't do something because of fear, you're pushing away the abundance that could potentially come to you by following your heart. Instead of choosing fear, you're going to choose trust. You're going to choose love, right? So I want you to think about that. But as you go through this week, I want you to do something for me. I want you to look at the decisions that you're making and ask yourself after each one or before you make the decision, am I making this decision from a place of fear? And if the answer is yes, then I want you to ask this follow-up question, which is, would I make a different decision if I was coming from a place of trust and love? And if the answer to that is yes, go with that one. I know it's scary, but what happens is that you're going to ask yourself the first question, and the answer is going to be, yeah, I'm making this decision out of fear. What is the decision that I would make out of love and trust? And you're going to have a different one. And then you're going to be like, I'm still going to go with the fear because the fear one feels less scary. But what should be the scariest thing to any of us is never reaching our full potential because we lived our entire life from a place of fear and we pushed away every opportunity that we could possibly have had because we were too afraid to trust and to come at it from a place of love. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And if you want more of, things to contemplate and journal prompts that are just there for you and a few times a week, make sure you shoot us a text at 248-206-3431. If you text us Journal 2021, we will get you on that list so that you can start to contemplate even more in between episodes. And if you're sick and tired of living in fear, like the thing is never the thing, right? And we can't see what is blocking us or where those things are coming from and why maybe we have an irrational fear about certain things or we can't seem to step forward, then it is time to book a white light session. Hop on over to the website, get on the wait list because again, there's the only way to the other side of anything is through. But if you don't know what you're working through, then it's going to be impossible to get there. So let's take that first step of getting over the fear of the unknown of what this might uncover. Don't think about, what might this uncover that I don't want to deal with. Think about what could this potentially unlock for me that would open me up to the rest of my life. Sending you so much love, so much light. And until next time, keep evolving.